I think we're recording. Well, welcome everyone. It's so good to have so many amazing friends and family in the room today. Just a little note for everyone, we are recording this session. You'll be able to hear it back if you have to go early or think people who haven't been able to join us today can watch this back. Um, Unfortunately, because of the settings on Zoom, we're unable to see everybody's beautiful faces today, which is a bit of a shame because we usually like to have a bit more of a human to human connection. But we are having a better time of the internet because no one's putting a big load on that. But thanks so much, everybody, for joining us here today for Regenerating the Regions, How Food Hubs Can Build Resilience, this exciting launch of the report co-authored by EK Rose and Rob Pekin, who I'm going to hand over to in just a minute. Um, my name is Elise Parups. I'm the partnerships head of partnerships here at the Queensland Fruit and Veg Growers, and I've had the delight and privilege to walk alongside Emma Kate and Rob for a long time now as, in social enterprise space as well as impact investing, and now in the food system space as well. And it's been so wonderful to see the progress and the steps being made in the food system space and the development of Emma Kate and Rob as amazing leaders. So before we kick this off, I'd really like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the country throughout Australia, wherever we're meeting. Today, I'm on Yagara and Turrbal country on the banks of the Meanjin River. And we do this with deep gratitude and respect for the traditional owners, custodians, and elders, both past and present. We know that First Nations people across the globe, actually, and in our very own country, have led the way around food systems and regenerative practices. They are masters in this space, and we do pay homage to the work that they have done in leading the way. Um, I am delighted, as I said, to be here with the co-authors of this report, Emma Kate Rose and Rob Pekin. And there's probably not too many people on this call who haven't heard of Food Connect, but just in case people have not been acquainted with the amazing work that you both have done, let's kick this off by a bit of a story, a genesis story, if you like, around the Food Connect Foundation. Emma Kate, do you want to lead this part? Tell us a
Yeah,
bit about
sure.
you and Food Connect.
Absolutely. Thanks, Elise. And thanks, everybody, for coming and spending your lunch hour with us today. It's really, really special to see so much interest. I think we had about 180 people register for today's webinar, so that's pretty cool. Um, as Elise said, Food Connect Foundation was started in 2009, and that was as a result of our early work in Food Connect, the social enterprise, which uh, helped local farmers access direct markets here in Brisbane with city eaters. And we'd been running that experiment, as we called it in the early days, for a few years, and a few communities around Australia were taking notice and wanting to see what about that model helped farmers, but also helped the nutritional health of eaters as well. And so we decided to stand up the Food Connect Foundation to share those learnings that we were experiencing on the ground. And nearly 20 years later, we're still doing that. Even though Food Connect, the social enterprise, has gone to greener pastures, we have taken all those learnings over those 20 years, and we've really sort of demonstrated and experimented with concepts that spoke to the regenerative principles around how we make our food systems fairer for everybody along the value chain. And one of those particular experiments was standing up Food Connect Shed as Australia's first community-owned local food hub, which is still running today. And that was back in 2018, where 500 of our supporters and investors, impact investors, came together to help us raise $2.1 million to buy the warehouse that we've been renting for 12 years. So our vision is a world where our vision is something that most people can relate to, a world where all Australians can access healthy, ecologically grown food through thriving regional food systems. And we put regional in there because cities rely on regions. So regional Australia is a huge economic powerhouse for cities. So how can we get cities to connect better with regions through the value chain? So regional food systems are the sort of fulcrum of the focus of the work that we do. And we want to make sure that everything is fair, from farmers through to distributors, through to warehousing operations, through to processors, manufacturers, and the people who, retailers, and the people who actually consume the food, but also do it in a way that doesn't exacerbate the planetary overshoots, that actually pulls back in a lot of those overshoots, and we start living within our means in the planetary sense. So our mission is that we support the creation of regenerative and regionalised food systems by working directly with communities to build shared infrastructure, develop local leaders, and create new pathways that connect farmers and food entrepreneurs beyond supermarkets. So our sort of theory of change is that when we share infrastructure, so not just the physical infrastructure like the buildings and the cold rooms and the logistics and the, refrigerated trucks, when we share that infrastructure, but we also fund and support the connection infrastructure, so the people power, the coordinating and the cat herding that goes into all that work within the value chain. When we share all of that and when we connect, then we create a fairer and more resilient food system for everybody. And at the moment, yep.
I was going to say, and Food Connect, the shed itself has become such an icon, or at least in Brisbane, I know across the nation, for that exact work. The culture of bringing people together around, the idea of how do we share and have a common economy around this great food system.
That's right.
I guess, for me, I'd love to hear a little bit more about how this report then came, because, you've modelled this work in Brisbane City through Food Connect Shed. How did this all come about? Why now? Why do we need this report now?
So the Food Connect Shed campaign was in 2018. We took delivery of the building. We got the title in 2019. So the business kind of technically started in 2019. And everyone, of course, knows that 2019 was a massive year of bushfires. And subsequent to that, we've had a lot of climate events that have really impacted regions across the country. WWF, straight after the bushfires, decided to do a bit of a listening tour for a year or two, and they stood up a program called Innovate to Regenerate, where they invited communities to put forward their ideas about what does a regenerative economy look like, and they received thousands of ideas, and 150 of those projects were chosen and were given a little bit of money to write up their case studies or put forward their ideas, or to develop their ideas a little bit more. So in 2022, we were awarded a grant to write up the Food Connect Shed as a case study. And there was a few delays with the report. We had lots of stuff happening on the ground here in Brisbane, both climate-wise, but also within the business that we were learning. So we decided to put off the publishing and the writing of that report and expand it in our own time to include not just the Food Connect case study, but a bit of a comparative analysis with what other people are doing around Australia, as well as some leading lights overseas. And also what kind of investment strategy, because we were doing things fairly innovatively on the ground in terms of community finance, as well as impact investment and philanthropy, how could we put an investment strategy together that would speak to these models being rolled out around Australia?
And the link there between, climate adaptation, food systems. I mean, it's so critical. I think that it's something that's overlooked in a lot of the dialogue and conversation that happens. We tend to siloize the component parts of what climate adaptation or climate change looks like. And food sometimes sits quite off to the side of that very important topic. I think bringing it back into the center of this The conversation around climate adaptation is super important. And it's also important the way that we adapt our financial systems in order to cope with that. The word regenerative really strikes a chord with me personally around, how we need to move forward on all levels, whether it be from an economic and environmental or a financial and economic mindset. We talk a lot about food hubs, and I wanted to unpack that. I mean, some people on the call will have some knowledge of what a food hub looks like, but it's quite nuanced in your case. And I want to try and unpack that a little bit more. Maybe Rob, can you talk to us a little bit about what a food hub is?
Sure, I can, Elise, and hi everyone. Great to have you on the call. Well, before we get to that, I think one of the just to follow on from what the Emma was talking about before, the context. Why now? Why would we replicate the Food Connect shed? What's in it for communities? Because we had a previous experience, as Emma was saying, when we replicated the Food Connect multi-farmer community supported agriculture model across Australia, and there was a lot of good learnings out of that. So we took the time to sort of interview some of the people that were involved in those replications, and there was some really great learnings from that we wanted to build into the replicating the Food Connect shed. But importantly, from a context point of view, because as Emma said, 20 years ago, Food Connect was founded in 2014, 21 years ago now, and we wanted to take the time to actually understand the context better. Where was agriculture now, considering the journey? And that's what that bottom arc is the chronology of agricultural paradigm from pre-industrial right through to now we're in this regenerative movement. And that was sort of signaling that a lot of people don't really want to be told how to farm, like certification, biodynamic certification, organic certification. And we're moving now into a verification system. And that matches the arc of humanity, where we're less and less trustful, or institutions, we don't trust institutions anymore. And people want to build the solutions that they want in their own communities. And in a way, when we were traveling the country, talking to farmers and talking to people who wanted to build this model of a scaled out solution for mid-sized farmers, the farmers who were missing out on they were really sort of feeling like, oh, I'm too big to go direct, or I'm too far away to go direct, but I'm also too small to compete in the larger market. And so there was a real desire to farm on their own terms and to also participate along the whole supply chain and work with those supply chain actors over the farm gate that really were wanting to match the heavy lifting that the farmers were doing. Because it's all well and good for farmers to be out there doing all this great work, but at the end of the day, if they haven't got buyers that care about this collective solution, then it's all for nothing in a lot of ways. And we know that, well, particularly you, Elise, at Queensland Fruit and Veg Growers, it's a really dire situation. Horticultural farmers are facing a massive amount of problems, and there's so many farmers who want to leave the industry, completely, because it's just so tough. So that was the context, was communities were wanting to design their own solutions, and the Food Connect shed was a representation of that model. And then the other thing that is probably unknown to most people, but it's sort of like the training wheels for us, was that the energy transition out of fossil fuels and into renewables, even though everyone thinks it's going to be the thing that saves humanity, is only really going to solve 20% of the problem. But it's a great model of transitioning from a huge paradigm of fossil fuels into a renewable sector. And the same with electrifying transport, electrifying cars, going to public transport. The transport sector is also on the move and decoupling from the old paradigm to a new paradigm. And then we're sort of seeing the same thing with houses, passive houses, green concrete, those sort of attempts. But food, fibre and agriculture sits as this, at the moment, it's a big part of the problem. But if we can invert that and see that as the solution to the human imperative, particularly when you look at the 9 planetary boundaries, 6 of them have already we've already gone over the boundaries. When we look at the SDGs, when you look at all of the barriers that Australian agriculture is facing, if we can build back our capacity to feed ourselves, build back our capacity to have sovereign food chains, and build back our capacity to be the corporations we want to be the businesses that we want to be. Food, fibre, and agriculture across the whole supply chain can be the biggest solution no one knows about. So that was the context. Yeah, it was a really, I mean, and the other part of that previous slide is talking about how we sort of intuitively, modernity and the knowledge that we've gained over the last, since Goethe, I suppose, lost that argument about rational science. We've got all this knowledge, but we haven't used our insight, we haven't used the wisdom, we haven't used the sort of intuition that we know is in there to create the solutions into the future. And so that was the sort of basis of, well, if Food Connect Shed is replicable, what are the aspects of the Food Connect Shed that fit into that context?
So that we're looking from that macro picture then, and we're looking at coming down into the micro. So let's have a deep dive into the Food Connect Shed as a bit of a micro look at what that system represents.
Yeah.
Now, this is, obviously you guys have worked on this for ages. Can you talk us through what the food hub looks like and how that builds back out to the scale?
Yeah, totally. So the Food Connect Shed is and there's a very detailed financial analysis and everything else, all the warts and all is in the case study in the report. So, but briefly, yeah, it's, the traditional food hub is a business or an organization that actively manages the aggregation, distribution, and marketing of source identified and regenerative food, primarily from local and regional producers to multiple markets. It serves as a place-based intermediary that strengthens regional food systems by providing critical infrastructure and services. And the twist that we put to it was, this is where particularly Emma came in, was we really wanted to have the infrastructure owned by the community in a way where they were a part of the solution and part of the I suppose, the living lab of how would this food hub work, and in particular, how could they support the enterprises that were in the Food Connect Shed. So the ownership model is 536 people own the building. We put a lot of work into creating a mission lock so that for perpetuity, this particular piece of infrastructure serves community and serves the needs of community and serves the needs of those local farmers. It has this was a bit complex. So we wanted to go out there with 4 models. One was, it's a building. How can we demonstrate buying a 70-year-old building and renovating it and retrofitting it in a way that was affordable, that was low cost in terms of, but also was an example of net positive regenerative design, as in the physical infrastructure. The second part was, how can we design it so it has this wholesale and retail flexibility and diversity? The third part was, it's an incubation place for all these social enterprises who wanted to scale their business up to a point where they were sustainable, but they also wanted to work with other businesses in how do we use each other's byproducts and how do we collaborate and share, bulk buying, how do we share all the skills that are existent in all those enterprises. And importantly for us, we wanted to have an ecosystem support that supported those entrepreneurs, whether they were a sauerkraut maker or a hot chili sauce maker, or, they made the most amazing sausage rolls. We wanted to support them with the other elements of business that particularly social enterprises tend to, and ecological enterprises tend to sort of leave out, the finance side of things. How do we buy things appropriately using the right type of capital? How do we support each other in the marketing side of things? So it was a real experiment around collaborative enterprises working together and playing around with what could we do to reduce food waste? What could we do to reduce plastics? What could we do to reduce food miles? What could we do to create an amazing product that it was advanced in terms of, its nutritional aspect, but it wasn't it wasn't ultra processed. It was something that was just simply done, going back to the old days of, fermenting, jamming, preserving, those sort of things there. And then the fourth element, which was really important to us, was having an event space, a function space where people could come and, have workshops, celebrate, party, just get up to all sorts of things. This third space, this safe space, and that's where Emma also her previous life as a doing crime prevention through environmental design, the philosophy of Jane Jacobs. How do you create spaces where people feel safe in, particularly because the investment is 83% owned by women? Out of the 96 enterprises we've had here, 67 are female owned, lots of diverse cultures in here. So it was really important for us to create a space that where they felt not only comfortable in, but they felt like they could get up to mischief and be themselves, be fully human in their enterprise and in their personality, and really, let those characteristics shine for the rest of the world to sort of see.
Yeah, I really love your framing in the report too of the head, the hand, and the heart aspect of what the Food Connect model brings to the table. But these principles that you've got, the 7 aspects of the philosophy behind what Food Connect is, I think is a really important point to bring out to everyone. And I just want to mention too, someone's got their hand up in the question and answer part. We are going to come around to questions at the end of this. So please, if you've got some questions, start saving them up for the end. We are going to have some question answer time at the end. But Rob, can you talk us through, or EK, you're going to lead this one about the philosophical principles?
Well, I mean, one of the things about running a food hub is that there are lots of types of food hubs. And so there's a bit of a spectrum, from being a more charity-focused food hub where you're focused on food rescue and food relief, right through to the big sort of export-focused sort of agri-food hubs that are being set up in clusters around the country. But every one of those food hubs have to deal with one of these elements, right? They have to deal with culture and governance. They have to deal with legal structure. They have to do with the operating model. They have to do, they've got all of these things are elements in a food hub. But what we've done is within each of these elements is we've looked at each one really closely and we've gone, okay, well, how can we make this element of the food hub regenerative? What needs to happen in order for this place to be regenerative in every aspect of what it does and what it says it does? And so the report kind of defines the sort of the things that we've tried and tested, but also, this is all very experimental. We're moving into a new paradigm. We're transitioning to a new food system. So what are the things that we can try out at low risk and low cost on the ground with community participation to get to that regenerative model of food systems? So Robert will talk about the finance and investment piece. I guess for us, for me, the culture and governance, for example, is a really important aspect. If you don't get your governance right, particularly in a community-owned piece of infrastructure, then it's going to get messy. So yeah. we ensured right at the very beginning. We spent a lot of time with the Murray community, the local Indigenous traditional owners here in Brisbane, in helping get our constitution right. There were a few challenges with that, but in the end, what we did was we embedded a social mission within our constitution so that could speak to how decisions were being made, using the Indigenous terms of reference. So we were lucky enough to be mentored by Aunt Lilla Watson and Professor Mary Graham in setting up those principles within our culture and governance model. And they are things that everybody can do around Australia because every region sits within a country, a nation, an Indigenous nation, and that's where the magic happens, is when you can connect our world and the Indigenous epistemology. Communities can get up to a lot of really great things together. So that's just one example from one of the elements of the food hub model that we can, demonstrate through as a regenerative example.
I loved the framing of this in the report too, because it's almost like a recipe. So, and it's a DIY, a DIY recipe in effect.
It's a DIY,
little bit of that. But
It's yeah.
the
I
core
mean,
elements are
yeah.
there.
And also acknowledging that it's not a cookie cutter model, and every community
No.
is unique, every region is unique, and they're within their own context. They have to do what's right for them. But there are principles that can be applied universally, we feel, and
Yeah.
that's the area of focus that this report.
And that's,
Yeah.
I guess that speaks to the heart of the replication model without having that cookie cutter. It actually, the community themselves can decide how much of certain elements they really need to lean into and what needs to be then come out of it. So the question is it replicable? And what kind of, I mean, we spoke a little bit before about the numbers, but I want to delve into this a little bit more because, who funds this and how does it get going? And what are the numbers saying at the moment?
Yeah, just go back a slide, Emma, to that other one there, because I think this is the crux of the report. And what we found, and we had a funder the other day ask or said, you must have taken a lot of time to think through what were those key elements that Emma articulated before, and why were they so important. And going back to that context is, collectively we know that one food hub can't do things alone in terms of building back that resilience and those sovereign supply chains and delivering healthy food. So it has to be a collective effort nationally. And those key principles that we sort of dug out of the DNA, because they've been embedded in the DNA even right back to 2004, which comes out of the associative economies work of Christopher Horton Budd and the sort of anthroposophical movement, the permaculture movement, the principles out of the permaculture. So a lot of these sort of principles that have been out there for a long, long time are buried in the DNA. So it took a bit of time to actually unearth what were they, to then allow replications of food hubs where we weren't telling food hubs in regions what to do. They were sort of cherry picking, but these key philosophies were guiding, I suppose, narratives with the examples here at the Food Connect shed. So one of them is the leasing model. How do you reduce the overheads? So you can reduce the overheads by stacking a whole bunch of enterprises in one place and saying, righto, just go and share everything. That's not, that's, whilst that sounds like, oh yes, you're going to get a full
Sounds like an
building.
output. Sounds like an
Yeah,
output rather than an outcome.
that's right. But how do you actually do that? How do you provide but will provide the sort of the vibe in the space and the governance around it that allows people to self-govern, to allow each other to organise without leaning on the shed's manager to say, hey, can you sort out this dispute? No, you're fully adult. You go and sort it out yourselves. You've got businesses to run. There's lots of potential in you collaborating together and doing that sort of stuff. So how do you write leases that spell that out? How do you write leases that take away the power of a landlord over a tenant? So a lot of these things have been sort of thought through in those key principles. The finance and the investment model, the idea of a blended capital stack, the idea of bringing community finance in where they really do have ownership.
I'm going to stop you there because I think in a couple of slides we're going to talk a little bit more about that blended finance, because there'll be people on the call who will have heard that before, and they'll want to have some real examples. I think this is, this slide in particular helps us to unpack that a little bit more.
Yeah, sure. So there's actually 9 different types of capital that contributed to the Food Connect shed up to date. We originally set out with a $2 million to $4 million goal. We're now at the 3.119 million goal, and that's the stack at the moment. So roughly 1.37 million is from impact investors in equity, and then the community in terms of equity share. These are all ordinary shares, so the yellow and the grey, is that colour? They're all ordinary shareholders, and then we have the community debt friendly loans. So these are pretty low doc. Very innovative loans by female investors into the shed because of its female cohort and the ownership structure. Really progressive, they also understand the dynamic of investors having the power. And in one case, one of the investors there, they just do spreadsheet loans. So there's nothing to sign. It's just, we'll put the money in your account. This is high trust, very empowering forms of lending. And then we've got a couple of debt equity swaps. So people who have put the money in as a interest only or sometimes no interest. interest, but no interest payments until it converts to equity at a later time. And then the other one was which is what released Emma and I from the day-to-day operations, which was $150,000. There's been a bit more catalytic philanthropy and grants that have come into the space over the time. Yeah, I mean, at the moment, government investment is still missing. So this is done completely without any banks. This has been done purely, putting one foot after the other, but having a good idea that if we're going to have diverse tenancies in the space, we need to have diverse capital types into the space to allow those businesses to, or basically in the words of Christopher Horton Budd, to put air under their wings so their imaginations can fly in service of community and in service of each other.
Yeah, that's great. So we talked a little bit before about this missing middle. It comes up in the report a bit. Trying to use that space as a space for people, and particularly for farmers who might be big, rather than the big ones, the middle size, the smaller farms, people who are producing food, actually having that flexible multi-use facility that they can access and to make their own mistakes and to create what it is that they need on the ground. You speak a fair bit about those barriers in the report. Emma Kate, can you kind of give us a little bit more of an understanding as, what is that missing middle from a distribution perspective and also a production perspective?
Yeah, I mean, we exist in a food system that is built and designed for productionist economic export mindsets. And so what that's done over the decades is it's actually forced small family farms and medium scale farms to walk off, basically. So we've seen a huge reduction in the number of farms, but we've actually seen an increase in the size of farms. So a lot of farmers have sold out, and a lot of corporations are moving into the space, or the neighbouring farmer has gone, well, we've got to get big or we're going to end up like our next door neighbour. So, and with that hollowing out of the number of farmers in regions, we've seen a hollowing out of infrastructure. And so what that means is that if you're a small or medium scale farmer, you actually can't access traditional markets that are economically viable for you. So what you're often doing is you're selling your produce into these markets at below the cost of production. And then that just drives debt, and that also drives, the further reduced terms of trade for farming, for small and medium-sized farmers. So by building the middle infrastructure back again, building those markets, building the value chain and the relationships back, you're seeing a larger return go back to the farmer because the relationships are valued, and farmers are acknowledged for the hard work that they're doing. And when we're looking at a whole farming system that's currently in a transition from conventional farming practices that are heavy on chemicals and heavily reliant on fossil fuels, and they need to transition to minimal use of chemicals and renewable energy, we need to be able to reward farmers for that expense. They're spending a lot of money transitioning right now, and they're producing excellent, high quality, nutritious food, but they're not seeing that recognized at the market. Yeah, that's right.
That's right.
So that's pretty much in a nutshell.
So is that happening now? Like, are we seeing this happening across the regions already?
It's happening in nascent. Oh,
yeah.
Sorry.
You go. That's fine.
Yeah, no, it's happening in nascent ways. We are seeing a lot of fledgling attempts. There's lots of, particularly women in regions, doing a lot of cat herding and organising and trying to build back a system that matches that reflects the values that Emma spoke about back then. But they're doing it tremendously underfunded and unsupported, and a lot of times just doing it on their own. And so one of the and generally because their husband is on the farm working, and we're seeing this reflected on farms as well. Those farmers are also, doing food under the cost of production, doing it in an unsupported way, basically as an individual. But we are seeing really good models emerge. I can think of Nice Rice, I can think of Pure Grain, I can think of down at the other end with Vic Health in Victoria, and these case studies are all in the report. 13 case studies on nascent food rescue, trying to move to this food hub model. Looking at things from a systemic point of view and looking at the root cause. And probably one of the big things is these small family farmers, they're the backbone of Australia, a bit like small businesses in the cities. They're the backbone of the economy of Australia. They employ a lot of people. They deliver a lot of services to regions and to communities, but they are really struggling. And a lot of times it's like this two-speed economy. The corporate economy, the corporate farmers have a whole different access to capital, whole different way of operating that gives them an advantage, particularly with the duopoly and the way the farmers can sell into not many markets where they have some power in that distribution. So the Food Connect shed and the Food Connect hubs provide an opportunity for farmers to participate in the solution with the other side of the supply chain to, I suppose, give them some hope, to give them some acknowledgement, and start to design a way out of this system. Whereas as I said before, this is a crisis. We're in the middle of a polycrisis. We've got so many conundrums, whether it's housing, land affordability for farmland, and food hubs are what we've seen as a vehicle in the middle there that can provide an opportunity to design and get some economic power back into the regions and drive an entrepreneurial economy in regions and in suburbs and in spaces that don't currently have that, because it's just been, as Emma said before, it's just been hollowed out.
Oh, it's so wonderful to see that this is, starting to emerge in that community sense across Australia. And I love this map. I absolutely love this map. It really starts to, give you the feel good around, what's happening. But I also want to recognise that, we've got a couple of different speeds, as you're saying, like a two-speed economy around agricultural hubs as well. So you've got these agri-food hubs that are being set up largely by government and by local governments around the place too. What's the difference between these smaller community-based food hubs and the agri-food hubs that are probably at the bigger end of town? Can you tell us a little bit more about that and why this is so different?
Did you want to take that, Emma?
EK, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure.
Emma wrote that part of the report. It was a good.
Stopping you in.
There's a few areas where we sort of lay out the distinction between, but most agri-food hubs are geared up towards, this existing food system that we're in for export markets. Yes, it is very much about, generating local economies, which is great. But if it's just for export, then what are we doing about our, sovereign supply chains? And is it, I guess the difference between that and what we're doing is that agri-food hubs kind of represent a transactional way of doing things, whereas food hubs, in our eyes, are more about relational ways of doing business. So, and you can do that much better on a local and regional scale. The types of finances Rob just mentioned that are available to corporate farmers versus small farmers, the same applies. So agri-food hub businesses can access government money, they can access corporate finance. Smaller food hubs rely on community, they rely on relationships, they rely on impact investment. And this kind of will feed into, the investment strategy piece that we'll talk about in a minute. I'll just leave it there because I am conscious of time.
Yes.
And I know there's a couple of questions coming through, so
we
I'd
do.
like to.
Yeah, we do have a couple of questions. And just a reminder, everybody, if you've got questions, to go to the Q&A tab and just start populating your questions in there so that we can get to them in a minute. So we talked about a little bit about, the regional capacity of what regional food hubs can do. I love the fact that, you guys in the report, you lean into that conversation about the strengths of what regional communities and how their capacity leans into that relational work. It's so beautiful. Really love it. Let's have a look now at where to from here. So what is going to happen next? How is this going to be able to be scaled?
Well,
Rob?
there's a bit of work left to be done, but the first thing we want to do is provide, bespoke advisory to those nascent and existing food hubs to strengthen them and to join them together in a community of practice and just build connectivity across Australia on attempts to do this, so they can, peer to peer, really start to work together and unpack, some more of what we've done, but also learn off each other. We've got to, we're going to do a lot more an analysis on the actual impact driven by the Food Connect shed. There's so many bits of data that we have that we want to explore more. And so we're going to do an impact piece.
Yeah, I think just on that, without the evidence, without
Mm.
the demonstrated social environmental impact, we can't really realistically attract the kind of investment that's required. So we've just received a grant from the Paul Ramsay Foundation to do a big piece of work on what the impact of Food Connect Shed is. So that we'll watch this space. We'll share that when that's done.
That sounds like it's going to
Yeah.
be fun. It's going to
Yes.
be very fun.
Yeah.
So,
But
how is this going to come together? So you've got investors, philanthropy, government, and I think, at the heart of all of this is, the growers and people on the ground and the regional partners. I'd love to hear a bit more about the investment opportunity. Thanks to the next slide, because I think, this is an innovative way of actually seeing how investment can be used to catalyze change and that long-term vision that is required to address climate adaptation, food systems, food security, food sovereignty. Talk us through what your vision is for what this next step looks like.
Yeah, so this is going to be a co-creation effort. We know there's a lot of impact investors who are leaning in now into systems investment. We know the actuaries, the sovereign wealth funds, the reinsurers, the bond markets are saying that business as usual, their asset base is going to be gone in 10 years if they don't change their business model. So the investment community is looking for the new economies, the new resilient economies, the economies they're going to build resilience and build robust regions, and particularly around food systems. It's a new and emerging space. So this fund is an evergreen fund. We don't want to develop it ourselves. We want to be part of the co-creation effort. We have a great, obviously, lived experience modelled here with the Food Connect Shed. We are, talking to a bunch of fund managers at the moment who are aware of what the actuaries are saying, and the superannuation funds are wanting to see. So, they're wanting, they're 20 to 40 year time frames, and they know some of the existing investments are on shaky ground. So, yeah, so this is all about basically establishing or a fund that will help establish, 50 to 100, it could be 200. We don't know how many how many regions actually will say, yes, we want one of these shared infrastructure model. It makes a lot of sense. It's all about this sharing the risk, sharing in the opportunities from that risk, but also the community investment piece gives that de-risks the whole investment side of things. And then if investors can see that in a way that delivers all of their ESG requirements, it delivers their scope 3, it delivers all of we haven't spoken much about the other forms of revenue investment. So you've got obviously investment on the balance sheet, but there's all sorts of forms that corporates can play in this space. So we sort of see ourselves as, a zone 2 to zone 3 horizon space where we can help those capital funds that are looking for a way out of the sort of current demise into a space that creates a new economy. The same with those big corporate businesses who do supply into hotel chains and into large institutional procurement. We can provide them with an opportunity to, on the revenue side of things, participate in this solution as well. So it's quite an exciting time. This is we are seeing nascent evergreen funds that are popping up all around the world, and it's really wonderful to see the investment community starting to really lean into this space. So we're looking forward to co-creating what this fund will look like in terms of its structure and how it works and the returns and all that sort of stuff. But importantly, in the document, we've laid out how this will meet most expectations of returns, whether you're a catalytic philanthropist, a venture philanthropist, someone who wants to provide debt, or someone who wants to have impact in their equity, or just a normal equity. It's a place for everyone to play.
Yeah, no, I love that part in the report as well, because it really does outline the active part that investors can play in this space, which is, a new and emerging space, I think, and very exciting timing wise. When I read the report, one of the things that really spoke to my heart quite deeply was around it takes a village to raise a child. Well, it takes a food hub to really raise up the entrepreneurs and the entrepreneurial spirit and to create that dynamism and also the connectivity within regional areas. I got goosebumps when I read that bit because it really speaks to the connection that food hubs provide, that relational piece, which is so very strong. Now, we do have some questions in the Q&A, so I'm going to do a little bit of a segue. We're coming to the end of this session. We want to try and get to a couple of these questions. So brevity will be great, Emma, Kate and Rob, when you're answering these ones. We've got about 5 or 6 in there. So keen to understand how you went about finding such a large number of values-aligned investors in the community, 500 careholders, such an incredible number of people who get what you're doing. It speaks to the relationship part, I think, of what I just highlighted there. Just briefly, EK, what are your thoughts about finding 500 people? I know it was pretty hard. Wasn't easy.
Well, the initial campaign was only supposed to be 30 days. We ended up taking the full legal amount of time required, which was 90 days. But look, we were so lucky in many respects, and I say lucky, but also not really, because we had worked very, very hard for quite a number of years running Food Connect as a business and doing as much as we could to connect farmers and eaters together and creating that sense of community. So a lot of the shareholders in Food Connect Shed are actually Food Connect customers. Also, I want to give a big nod to the social enterprise space. Our involvement in social enterprise over the years has really created an amazing network of people who get what we do and what we're on about. So that pretty much speaks to the impact investment side as well as the philanthropy, as well as our customers. So I think and we do talk about communities. Not everyone has a ready community like that to get that sort of investment. And that's where things will differ from region to region. So finding, and this might answer Reese's question, how do you determine whether regions are ready for it? You don't have to have 500 people ready to go, but I would sort of say, look, we did our version of an attempt of what the community independents are doing in the political landscape. Have a look at those models where communities are getting around kitchen tables and working out what kind of future they want for themselves and start building from there.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
And I'd just add Elise, over the 20 years we've been doing this, we've been seeing these examples of people wanting to participate with their money in these solutions. It was just a matter of tapping into that. And I would say that every region is ready for this. They just don't know how to do it. The structures don't exist for them to go, I'd much rather invest my money in that building down there and renovate that building for 20 enterprises to share than in my super fund, than in, these abstract things. So this food hubs really take away the abstract and bring
the tangible.
The tangibles. I mean, we've got to land spaceship Earth in a safe way. And food hubs, there is a truckload of money up there waiting for the investment community and for regions to have the financial nous and guts to ask. I mean, as Emma said, it wasn't luck. It was us putting our hand up. And once we got to about 800 grand invested in the shed, then I could go to the impact investors and say, the impact investors are there. The community's there. They've invested this amount. They've de-risked your investment. Where are you? And talk to them in those sort of terms where they're going, oh, yes, okay. There's various rules that the investment community run by. And we just don't have access to that language and that knowledge and that understanding. So that sort of, obviously there was 3 years of learning before we went down the track of the community investment, but and we're still learning, and I would say that the appetite from the investment community and from regions to put their money into place-based ideas and examples is more ready than we think it is.
Yeah.
Yep.
Let's go to Rowan's question here. What role could hubs like Food Connect play in a national food plan?
Oh, well,
yeah. So, I mean, well, that's a good
where do you
question.
stop?
That's
short.
That's a very
short answer.
It's a very loaded question, Rowan. Notwithstanding the makeup of the recently announced National Food Council, which was pretty disappointing, to be honest, but you'll hear more from us about that shortly. Look, on a national food plan, food hubs could play an amazing role in climate resilience, in climate adaptation, in sovereign supply chains, and in economic development of regions. So I'll just leave it there.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. I'm going to skip Leanne Lynn's actually asked 2 questions here, but this one I'm really interested in as well, which is the reason why government funding's not been a big part of the picture yet. Is it an active decision or is it just low interest from them? I think there might be some competition with the agri-food hubs and, the certainty, the randomness of community. Would that play a part in that decision from government?
No, it was more government weren't ready at the stage. We sort of spent a lot of time trying to engage with government, and we'd sort of realised that these solutions are ahead of government. They're ahead of policy. They really are a way that people can get ahead of the game. That being said, we know there is an appetite now for government to be engaged. So it was more a matter of timing, more than and our lack of engagement with government at that serious level. But we now know that there's a lot more opportunity, or governments are looking at, if you look at the infrastructure fund, the National Infrastructure Fund and other funds, they didn't exist, 6-7 years ago. So it's a good question though.
Yeah. Lynn's first question is around, the shared decision making that it takes when you're sharing equipment and facilities and things like that. I think that speaks a little bit to your governance modelling. I mean, the reason why governance is such a strong pillar within your 7 pillars or your 7 principles for the shed, surely that's one of the principles going forward. How do we share? And each community is going to bring something different, right?
Yeah, and also it changes. So over the 7 years that the Food Connect shed has been around, we've had roughly 95 different tenants go through. So they've all had different needs for equipment. I mean, of course, there's your basic stuff for commercial kitchens and processing facilities, but what we often try to do is we collaboratively work out what the needs are and where the shed could invest in something, or where the entrepreneur themselves needs to find the finance themselves for that stuff. So it's really dependent on the tenant in question.
Yeah, we generally had a rule of anything over $10,000 and was going to be shared by 2 or 3 tenants. We would go and buy that, because the whole idea of the shed, it's not only a safe space for people to feel comfortable in culturally, but it's also a space where the equipment is maintained and is safe equipment. We didn't want, secondhand equipment coming in that could be of danger.
Dangerous.
And often when a tenant come in with a large piece of equipment that they wanted to use or take up space in the kitchens, we would say, unless you're going to allow that to be shared, we will buy it and have it as a shared piece of equipment. So you sell it and we'll install equipment that we want, that we can maintain, that we know is quality, that we know is, all of the things that we want in the shed. So there was, that goes to the governance model. It also goes to this sort of exploratory way, this lab of, well, how do we do things like that, where our role as the owners of the shed is to provide a space where all the best equipment is available to them, and then they come in and just get up to all this good mischief. So it's another way of raising or lowering the overheads, and for them to get up and boogie and have the air under their wings where they can soar.
Get up and boogie. That's hilarious.
Yeah. Oftentimes, and it's a really important place, is that us in the food system space and farmers, we're just under so much pressure, and we at the social enterprise space, we sort of take things so seriously that we need spaces where we can just go, yeah, let's have a bit of fun. Let's see how this works. Let's try this. Let's try that. And we never know what. And we've seen time and time again so many amazing products, so many amazing collaborations, so many amazing learnings that people have switched because the space is a vibe that allows them to go. To not be told, this is all about lowering food waste, or this is all about local food, or this is all about organic food. It's a space where they can, my favorite saying is, a man convinced against his will remains forever still. Whereas when a person goes and decides for themselves out of their own volition, I'm going to have the best low waste food product on the planet, it's an unstoppable force.
And does this speak to a little bit? I mean, there's another question here about First Nations being key to the food hub. I think the way that you've approached the governance bit is not around can't, black, white, polar opposites or binaries. It's actually more about the flexibility, and that speaks a little bit, I think, maybe that First Nations approach of being flexible, adaptable, hearing what people have to say, listening deeply to what the responses and what the solutions might be. Is that true?
Yeah, their wisdom is.
I think you just answered the question, Elise.
Yeah, oh, sorry.
Yeah. No, it's good.
Whoops.
No, but I think you're right. I mean, we can't emphasize how much time we spend with Aunt Mary Graham or Aunt Little Watson, and how tuned in they are to a deeper way humanity can operate. Particularly when you look at Mary Graham's autonomous regard. How do you sit in these messy negotiations full of joy and full of curiosity and full of non-judgment? How do you decouple power and authority? These are embedded into the way the Food Connect runs. How do you unleash the full humanity of an individual where they're autonomous, but they're collectivized with each other? These are critical things that we just can't get enough of. And if there's probably one thing is to really deeply look at that sophisticated philosophy, the terms of reference, the epistemology that First Nations people use or have used before colonisation. They're still putting it back together. It's an amazing understanding that you will never, ever turn away from again.
Look, we've probably got time for just one more question. So sorry I didn't get to all of you. But this one is about the role of tourism and agritourism in visitation to the food hubs. How critical will that be? And particularly leading up to the Olympics, everyone's talking about agritourism as the thing. Do you see a role in tourism as part of this?
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much innovation and entrepreneurialism that happens in food hubs. I can't tell you the amount of times we're contacted on an average week for people to come and visit and do a tour of Food Connect Shared. I just wish we would monetize that. Yes, absolutely. There's a huge opportunity for visitors to come into regions and learn about that region through food hubs being that demonstration. So some government investment in that would be amazing.
Yeah.
And
it's timely, right? In the lead up to the Olympics and things like that, when there is so many opportunities around the doorstep, we can't not seize those moments. I am conscious of the time. I do want to finish on time. I just want to say a huge thank you to Emma, Kate and Rob for sharing this report and to WWF for finding the funds to be able to unleash this sort of work is really important. It's often understated and not well highlighted, the work that you two do. I think this report goes some way to highlighting the amazing work that Food Connect has done. So thank you to both, and thank you to everyone who's participated. Your interest in this is genuinely appreciated. And I'm quite excited about what's next for Food Connect and what you two will get up to. I hear there's a webinar series coming up. Is that true?
Yeah, we've got plans for next year to start doing some deep dives into the report itself, because it's a bloody long report, and a lot of people, TLDR, we don't want to read them. So how do we break the report up into webinars that we can do some deep dives on? So that's planned for next year.
What an exciting thing. We'll be looking out for that very much. Appreciate the work that you guys do. Thank you so much for everybody for coming along today. We hope that you've got some insights and some great takeaways for your own work in this space, and look forward to seeing you all at the Food Connect shed sometime soon.
Yes, everybody's welcome. So thank you so much for attending, everybody. It was really appreciated. We got 180 people registered for this, so thank you so much.
Really terrific.
And there's a party next week, the Festivus. So on the 5th of December.
Friday night.
Friday night, yep.
I'll be there.
One of the things we didn't mention is there's a distillery and a brewery in the shed. So it's and they create amazing products for us to expand our cultural dimensions.
Wonderful. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Pleased to see you here. I'll see you next
Thanks,
time.
everyone. Thanks, Elise.
Thank you.
Yes, and thank you, Elise. You did a great job. Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks, everyone.